Welcome back. My name is Candace Sanderson, and today is the first of a series of videos on dreams and dreaming. At the end of this video, I'll share some suggestions on how to improve your dream recall. I also invite questions and comments from the audience. What has worked for you? Do you have any suggestions for us on how to remember your dreams? I want to start by sharing one of the most significant dreams, the first significant dream that I can remember. It was so important that it changed my thoughts about life. Now, that didn't happen all at once, but it planted a seed that grew. This dream, the one that meant so much to me, it wasn't even my dream. It was a dream my mother had. I've shared this story in a couple places. It's in my first book, The Reluctant Messenger. I have a whole chapter on dreaming called I Dreamed a Dream. And it's also on that other YouTube channel that I have with Donna Rebido, The Reluctant Messenger Unleashed. That's a virtual book club about my first book. And by the way, I've recently published a second edition to that first book, The Reluctant Messenger. And what I did in that second edition is I added a lot of detail, about 50 pages worth, that mostly came from my conversations with Donna as we unleashed the Reluctant Messenger in that virtual book club YouTube channel. But I'll leave the links to the Reluctant Messenger Unleashed in the description below the video that you can check it out if you want. But back to the dream, I'll never forget it. I was in college and I'd come home for a long weekend. When I woke the next morning, my mother told me about a dream she had just had. In the dream, my sister Jana said, Mr. Johnson was with her. Now, this man, Mr. Johnson, had been the CEO of the business college my sister had attended. I didn't really get it. I didn't really understand the significance of that dream until the evening paper arrived. And I saw Mr. Johnson's obituary that detailed his sudden passing. You see, my sister at age 23 had been killed in a car accident a short time before this dream. And when she said Mr. Johnson is with her, and then I saw the obituary, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't wrap my head around what was going on. My mother had told me her dream hours before the paper arrived. And this was way back in 1970, long before the internet. Back then, we didn't even have cable TV. There were only 3 TV channels. So we didn't have news on demand like we have now. My family did not know Mr. Johnson or any of his family. Only my sister Jana was connected to him. So there was no way my mother would have known about his passing. This dream brought me several lessons. One, when my sister welcomed Mr. Johnson to the other side, I learned we are not alone when we cross into that dimension that we call death. And number 2, when Jana told my mother of Mr. Johnson's arrival, I learned there is communication after death. And the third lesson, the importance of dreams. This is where the communication had occurred between my mother, who had the dream, and my sister, who had passed. So this was my introduction to the sometimes wonderfully weird world of dreams. Dreams are not always those random scenarios that seem to be jumbled together. They're like that sometimes, right? But this is what made this dream so important. This dream meant something so significant and potentially life-altering. It was supernatural, something that I was unfamiliar with back then. Now, had my sister come back from the dead to announce someone else's passing? I did not know whether to feel scared, confused, skeptical, thrilled. Probably all of those emotions ran through me. But one thing for sure, this was new. It was new for me. I could no longer think of dreams as these haphazard, meaningless events because some of them did matter. I could not explain it. I certainly did not understand it, but I was aware that I had stepped into new territory. Now, let me give you some context to who I was back then. I grew up in Western Kentucky. This area of the country is in the middle of what we call the Bible Belt. Religion was a very significant part of my upbringing. Spirituality was one of those new age ideas that, frankly, I didn't give much thought to. As I got older and started college, my courses started leading me away from my religious background, and they were actually guiding me toward a new religion for me, science. You see, my training as a psychologist was teaching me what to trust: the material world of the physical, the world of measurement. My classes were teaching me that anything that was outside of the physical was not based in truth, but instead was based in pathology. But there was this secret side of me that nobody knew about. There were things that my science could not explain. I could not mark it up to pathology because I knew better. This secret side of me was based on information and experiences I had gathered from my mother. Long before she shared the dream of my sister and Mr. Johnson, I knew about her intuitive nature. She had what we called in those days ESP, extrasensory perception. If she said that she had a feeling about something, I knew to pay attention because she knew things that others did not. And although there was no way that I could explain it, I learned to respect her intuitive nature. When my mother told me about the dream, this became a pivotal point in my life. And I could no longer think of dreams as fantasy or as a chemical release. And although this dream occurred decades ago, its impact remains with me even today. I didn't know how to reconcile this with my life of science, with what I was learning in college. So I continued living in a world defined by materialism, trusting only what I could measure. But something had changed. A seed had been planted. I finished my training and became certified as both a clinical psychologist and a year later, a school psychologist. But the doors to the non-physical had cracked just enough to allow me to glimpse into a new truth. Then I became curious, wondering about a dimension where my physical senses did not operate the way that I thought that they should. I continued to live an empirical, pragmatic life, at least on the surface. But those experiences with my mother piqued my interest. I could not explain them. They did not fit within my paradigm of life. So I kept them neatly tucked aside until I was ready to see more. But especially from the time that my mother told me the dream, that started my fascination with these nighttime adventures that occur when we're sleeping. I've kept a dream journal for years, and it's close to 250,000 words long. Some dreams are precognitive, where I learn of things that haven't occurred yet. Other dreams are visitations where I'm hanging out with souls who have passed. And I say souls because they're not just people, it can be animals too. So there's all sorts of different categories of dreams. But I want to start this series by talking about precognition, precognitive dreams. Think about that, precognition. Cognition is thought, awareness, understanding. So obviously precognition is something that occurs before awareness or understanding. I've had so many precognitive dreams, but having that dream journal as a reference helps me see patterns. Some, and probably most of my precognitive dreams are insignificant. They're trivial. They only have meaning for me. I'll dream of someone I haven't heard from in years, and within days, there they are. For example, I dreamed of a couple I used to work with. The next day, this man and his wife literally showed up on my doorstep. Now, let me give you a little background here. I had worked with them when I was a psychologist in Kentucky, but I had moved over 1,000 miles away to Florida. About 5 years had passed since I had moved, and when I came home one day, right after I'd had this dream, guess who showed up in person at my doorstep in Florida? Yes, they did. I'm going to mention a couple of precognitive dreams that I wrote about in The Reluctant Messenger. And what's significant about these, it's not the content, but it's the messenger's description of precognitive dreams and how they work. In the first dream, I was taking a test with a group of psychologists from the school district where I worked. It was a pop test, so I hadn't studied for it, and that freaked me out. In the dream, I stated retirement was near, and I'm too old to be back in school taking tests. It didn't even seem like a significant dream, but you never know. This was January, and we were just returning from a winter holiday break. Students were still on vacation, so our first couple of days back started later than usual. We were going to have some training sessions for 2 days instead of being at our usual assignments. So this gave me a little bit of extra time. I made sure I recorded the dream in my journal before I got ready for work. I showed up at the administrative center, prepared for a 2-day-long workshop. Our coordinator welcomed us back and then introduced 2 nationally known trainers who would be conducting the workshop. Guess what? They started passing out Scantron sheets. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the olden days, those are sheets where you have to bubble in responses. And this told me one thing. This was a test. This would be a pre-test on the subject material that we would be trained on, that we would be covering. They wanted to gather baseline data to learn what we knew about the subject before the training began. They would do a post-test later to see what we learned. I do not like tests. Never have, never will. And when I realized what was happening, I leaned to the woman sitting next to me, Phyllis, and I said, I am too close to retirement to feel like I'm back in school taking tests. Now, only as those words left my mouth did I remember my dream. I actually pulled up my dream journal from Dropbox, because it's online, on my phone, and I showed her the entry where I had said exactly the same thing. Now, the other precognitive dream I mentioned in the book, I had this, for lack of a better word, bunny migration. I dreamed I was lying on a blanket in a field when thousands of bunnies moved across the field. They were migrating, and they jumped on and over me as they crossed the field. It was an absolutely great dream. I could feel their weighted, tiny, furry feet jumping on me, and it literally tickled me, and I started laughing. In fact, I think it was my laughing that woke me up. But once again, I documented the dream. And the next day, someone gave me 3 items, 2 toys and was a little statue. And they gave them to me to give to my granddaughters. Guess what? All 3 were rabbits. So this was another precognitive dream, nothing significant. It was just a heads up of what was to come my way, lots of rabbits. The messengers actually clarified the dream, showing me this was just a sample, an example of precognitive dreams. By explaining how precognitive dreams work, I can take that information from the messengers and generalize it to other ways of communicating with the non-physical. This applies to lucid dreams, where you're awake in the dreams, It applies to the communications I receive from messengers. So let's get to some of the messages that occurred. This was January 28th, 2014. Events are offered to humans through the dream state prior to manifestation in the earth plane. This is mostly recognized with the onset of major events such as the Great Tsunami of 2004 or the 9/11 attacks in the United States. Because earth plane events of great magnitude affect large numbers of humans, many had foreshadowing through their dreams. Most insignificant precognitive dreams, such as the gift of rabbits, do not rise to the level of wakeful recall. Okay, so far, so good. This makes sense to me. It's a cosmic heads up to a significant event, or to an event. In my case, it wasn't significant. Let's continue. The interface between the dimensions is where dream seeds / dreamers collect and recognize these not yet manifested energies. As humans awaken, the interface is more accessible and dream recall improves. The dreamer, dream seed, is a subset of light workers who are instrumental in guiding masses through the final shift into the next dimension. They are charged with helping others recognize, acknowledge, understand, and interact with their dreams on a more conscious level. Okay, there's a few things I need to unpack with this last paragraph. One being interface, also talking about a final shift into the next dimension. The final shift refers to something that the messengers told me later, that Earth is going through a shift to higher vibrational frequencies. And as she does that, humanity comes along with her. We become more enlightened. That veil thins. And that's also a reason why someone like me began receiving messages from the other side. That veil is thinning. But when they talk about the interface, this was a new term for me. But shortly afterwards, they told me more about it. This is what the messengers call a way station. It's actually a space that's between the veil. You've got the veil, and then on both sides of the veil, between the dimensions, that is what's called the interface. And this space operates like a buffer. It's where the energy conversions will take place that will allow us to be able to move beyond the veil and then return. And it's in this space where it transforms our energy frequencies. And it allows us to have a much better match with the veil so that we can connect with the other side. Let me get back to the message. There is a subset of light workers called dreamers or dream seeds. A planted seed expands. Roots extend down, anchoring the plant in the ground. A seedling emerges from the seed pod, extending upward and breaking through the soil. The soil is similar to the interface into the next realm, from earth to air. Similar to this process, seeds must be planted in one realm, dreams, for manifestation to occur in another realm, the earth plane. Okay, I've got to stop here and make a few comments. First of all, this analogy with the plant. For those of you who have followed my work or have read my books, you'll recall my first message that arrived was on August 28th, 2013. And it was a message about a plant. They talked about how when a plant is deeply rooted or grounded in Mother Earth, it then ascends toward Father Sky, and then it is in perfect alignment with Source. When it's in that alignment, it will produce a flower. And then they said a flower is a flower, hyphenating the word flower, a flower of energy. And humans too are flowers of energy. Well, here's that analogy again with the plant. The soil that the seedling breaks through to become a full-fledged plant, it's comparable to the interface. Like seeds that are planted in soil, our dreams become the interface where manifestation begins. Just as the plant manifested into the air so it could reach up towards source, we then take those items. It's like a seed pod developing within the dream to manifest during our waking state. So let me continue with the message. When a plant breaks through soil, it has reached a new dimension, yet its roots remain anchored in the seed's source dimension. Dream seeds are similar, for they operate within the interface, connecting two dimensions while still rooted in the earth plane. As this one continues to develop her role as dream seed, the interface between full consciousness and the dream state, also referred to humans as the veil, becomes more accessible. Okay, let's unpack this some more. By giving me an example of a seemingly innocuous, insignificant precognitive dream, that bunny migration, the messengers are teaching me how this precognitive dream occurred. I was, according to the messengers, and this was news for me, developing into a role that they call dreamers or dream seed. I could understand this connection, especially when they compared it to a seed. Just as seeds begin in that soil, dream seeds begin as they break their enclosed seed pod within that dream state. And when the plant breaks through the soil, it has reached through the veil, that barrier that separated it from being able to reach toward the sky and manifest as a plant, to be able to flower, to be able to flow. Our precognitive dreams give us a cosmic heads up, giving us just a glimpse of what's to come. That's the manifestation that will occur in the waking state. So I was learning a lot, not only having a precognitive dream that seems so insignificant, but taking that as an example, piece by piece, realizing what was actually occurring. So I was beginning to have lessons as a dream seed, which was all new for me. But this is a good stopping point. I want to end with a few suggestions. Keep a dream journal. And how do you do that? You start with an intention to remember your dreams. I have this step. I no longer need it, but it used to be helpful. As I'm getting ready to go to sleep, I use my dominant hand. In my case, that's my right hand. And I tap my forehead. And as I tap my forehead, I say, I will remember my dreams. I will remember my dreams. And then I just let it go. Now, when you go to sleep, have a notebook by your bedside so you can jot down elements of your dream as soon as you wake up. If you're one of those people who keep your phone close by, open it and voice record your dream. But once you start recording your dreams, even if it's just a word or two, you're opening a channel and those dreams will become more accessible to you. Here's another suggestion. If the dream starts to fade as soon as you get up, what has worked for me is to lie down on your left side and take 2 or 3 deep breaths. And you kind of just sink back into where the dream was. That works for me, but other people say, return to the position where you were when you woke up. So experiment, see what works best for you. And do you have other suggestions? If you have any suggestions or questions, feel free to contact me or leave them in the comments below. So until next time, my only message to you is to dream on.